Good morning, friend. Welcome back to Locally Raised. My name is Marta. Ooh, isn't hanging right. My name is Marta if you're new, and today we're working on some blueberries. I recently bought 10 pounds of blueberries from a local farmer, and I've been eating a lot of them. My family's been eating a lot of them, but we can't eat 10 pounds of fresh blueberries. It's time to preserve some. So let me show you our lineup for the day. Here are some of the blueberries that I dried in the oven yesterday. It takes a long time, but I'm glad I did. We're going to turn those into a blueberry vanilla granola. Here's the remainder of the fresh blueberries. These have been washed and stemmed, and we're going to turn them into blueberry maple preserves. And then here's a few that I froze, and we're going to make some blueberry muffins out of those. Classic way to use blueberries. I'm looking forward to that little treat and having something baked on hand for a treat breakfast this week. I'm just preheating the oven to 300 degrees. Then I'm going to get my wet ingredients and just heat them up a little bit. I use coconut oil as my oil, and it needs to be heated up a little bit to become liquid for coating the oats. My family buys honey by the gallon. We go through a lot in this house because it's what I use to make granola, to make preserves. I use it for baking. I'm going to need another gallon soon. I like this granola recipe a lot because it's more of a template than a recipe. There's a lot of room to decide what you want to use as your oil, what you want to use as your sweetener, what kinds of fruits you want to use. So today I'm adapting it for blueberry vanilla. That's half a cup of coconut oil, half a cup of honey, a half teaspoon of cinnamon, a half teaspoon of salt. I'm using my Redmond real salt. I love this stuff. Good flavor, good nutritional benefits. I'm also going to make one addition to the recipe, and that's vanilla. I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla just because I really like how that flavor pairs with blueberry. Granola is really, Granola is really flexible. It is not something like baking bread where you have to be a little more precise with your measurements. So feel free to experiment and tweak when it comes to granola. Granola is also one of those things that always tastes better homemade than from the store. Once you've made your own granola, it's kind of hard to go back. I'm going to get this just gently heated enough to combine it, get it mixed up. All right, now that I've got an even consistency from my wet ingredients and they're fully combined, I'm going to put my dry ingredients together. I often make a double or triple batch when I take time to make granola, but today I'm going to make a single batch because I don't want to blow through all these blueberries at once. I'm pleased that I have dried blueberries on hand. We might want to use some for something else. So I need 3 cups of oats. I get these oats through Azure Standard. They're organic. I buy them in bulk, which is one of the ways that I'm able to make organic affordable. I actually did the math, and I buy 25-pound bags of oats from Azure. Actually, I'll show you. Here, if I flip you around, I've got a 25-pound bag down on my kitchen floor right now, waiting to be put into one of my storage buckets. Anyhow, as I was saying, I did the math, and a 25-pound bag of organic oats from Azure Standard comes out to the same price per pound as great value oats from Walmart if you're buying just a normal amount. The buying in bulk through Azure has allowed me to source some of my ingredients organically without totally destroying my grocery budget. All right, so that's 3 cups of oats. I'll add a cup of almonds. You can see these are not organic. I do what I can, but try not to be legalistic about it. And I'm just going to mix that up with my hands. My hands are clean. Now I'm going to add the wet ingredients to this dry mix. It's important to stir and make sure that everything gets coated. And then I'm going to get that onto a lined baking sheet. The blueberries won't be added until the end. Whatever dried fruit you're using will get added after the baking because it's already dried out. It doesn't need more heat and drying time. I'm going to spread this out and try to get it to an even consistency so that it heats evenly. But try to get to an even thickness, I should say. Granola is ready to go into the oven. That came together really quickly. That was less than 15 minutes. I know the next project's going to take a little longer, but it feels good to have something done. I'm going to get my dirty pot and bowl into the dishwasher. I try to always make sure I have an empty dishwasher when I'm doing multiple cooking projects at a time. I enjoy myself so much more if the kitchen isn't chaotic. Then we'll move on to those preserves. All right, moving on to the biggest project for the morning, blueberry maple preserves. I'm going to start cooking down those blueberries. This morning I washed these blueberries and I went through them one handful at a time looking for stems to pull off because there's always a few that still have their stems. Definitely don't want those in my preserves. I'm not exactly sure how much I have here, but I think I can make a batch and a half. So I'm going to get these into my pan and start cooking them down. The recipe says to add a 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to assume I can make a batch and a half, so I'll add a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons, which is an 1/8 cup. Who am I kidding? I don't have the patience to measure out 2 tablespoons. I'll just eyeball that. While those are cooking down, I gathered my other ingredients. It really doesn't take a lot to make these. So we've got maple syrup. If you've been following along with any of my other canning projects, you may have seen that I am avoiding sugar right now just because it makes my body feel bad. So Pomona's universal pectin is a pectin that can be used without sugar. It doesn't rely on sugar as a gelling agent. So I like that I can get maple flavor in these preserves and skip the sugar. If you're interested in sugar-free jams and jellies, I also made some sugar-free strawberry jam, sweetened with honey a few weeks ago. And I've made apricot jam and cranberry jam as well. So I'm a fan of these naturally sweetened jellies. I'm going to keep making them. I've got lemon juice. It's important to use bottled lemon juice when canning because the acidity varies when it comes to actually squeezing your own lemon juice. Pomona's requires some calcium water. There's a packet that comes in the box that has calcium in it, but the calcium water can be kept in your fridge from previous projects. So this was left over from my strawberry jam that I made a couple weeks ago. And then there's the pectin itself. I'm talking too much and these need a stir. Looking good over here. Let me show you. I love the color that blueberries change to as they cook. I think it becomes so much prettier when they're cooked down and get that sort of purpley hue. Those still need some time to cook down. So I'm going to go grab my canner, fill it with hot water and get that on the stove so that it's ready when the preserves are ready to be water bath canned. I've got my jars here. I'm not actually sure exactly how many I'll need because I'm doing a batch and a half, but I don't know if I have enough blueberries for a batch and a half. Anyhow, I'm going to let these jars sit in this hot water just so they're hot when I put the preserves in them. If you're new to canning, avoiding extreme temperature changes is generally the idea. So you don't want to put something really hot into completely cold glasses. Anytime that glass gets shocked with a temperature change, it can shatter. And it has. I've done it. It has shattered. I've been trying to make more jams lately because my husband John has been tearing through them. He and I stopped eating gluten, or went gluten light, I'd say, a year ago, just because both of us were dealing with some health issues. Anyhow, he replaced peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in his diet with just peanut butter and jelly. Hey, I was just talking about you. I was saying that you've replaced peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with just peanut butter and jelly. So I need to increase my jelly production. Spoon in each hand. I just realized that I didn't set my timer on that granola, if I'm 100% honest. So let's check on it. I know what it should look like. It's okay, granola's forgiving. That actually looks great. It's got that golden color. It's okay for your granola to still be wet. It will be wet until it cools. As it cools, it'll dry. I'm going to add a cup of the dried blueberries to the granola mixture and mix it up. If you're interested in the process of drying these blueberries, I cooked them on 225 in my oven until they shriveled up and looked like raisins, which took about 7 or 8 hours. A lower temperature would preserve a little more flavor, but 225 is my oven's lowest setting. A food dehydrator would also be ideal for this task if you have one on hand. I like a granola texture that has clusters in it that are stuck together. So I'm tamping things down with my spatula because that's going to help it cool in blocks, in a solid block, so that when I break that up, it'll have clusters. If you don't like that sort of texture and you'd rather just a looser texture for your granola, you could skip this step. All right, getting back to my preserves now. My blueberries have definitely released their juice. I'm going to measure out what I've got. I think it's going to be about 4 cups, and I'll probably just make a single batch. I'm going to need another saucepan. Look at that pretty color. I got 4 cups in there, and then I did actually get almost 2 cups out of it yet, so I'm going to do this batch and a half. I need to use every drop. I'm going to make sure to get it all. So I've got 6 cups of the cooked down blueberries in here. I'm going to add in my lemon juice. Calls for a 1/4 cup. So I'll do a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons. One and 2. I also need 2 1/4 teaspoons of my calcium water. It's important to shake this up because the calcium and the water do separate. I'm going to shake that up. And then get 2 1/4 teaspoons. 1, 2. Plus a 1/4. Stir in that lemon juice and calcium water. I like how that changes the color again. It's so pretty. Next, I need to mix my maple syrup and my pectin. I like this dark maple syrup from Azure. Because I'm doing a batch and a half, I need a cup plus 2 tablespoons. And I'll put this recipe down below for you. There's the 2 tablespoons. And from my pectin, I need 2 1/4 teaspoons. That's 1, 2, plus 1/4. And I'll combine these. Now I just need to bring this back up to a boil, a full boil, before I can drizzle in that maple and pectin combination. My blueberries have reached a full rolling boil now. You can see that when I stir, the boil continues. That's the sign. So now it's time to drizzle in the maple pectin combo. I love that things in the kitchen are often pretty in addition to being delicious. This winter, I have hopes of tapping some maple trees. I realize a mile from here, my parents and brother own a retail greenhouse, and I didn't notice before that there are a lot of maples on the property. We're going to see if we can get some of our own maple sugar next winter. Hopefully that'll go into the following year's preserves. That would feel really good. All right, now this has to return to a full boil for a few minutes to get all that pectin dissolved. While this is returning to a boil, I'm going to get my jars ready for filling. I just turned this off, but be careful of a high boil. This stuff splatters everywhere, and it's definitely going to stain things. I'm going to fill my jars to 1/4 inch of headspace. When making jellies and jams, the consistency is often so liquid that I don't bother with the debubbling phase of the canning process, but these are preserves. There are chunks of fruit in here. So I'm just going to run my headspace tool, which is also my debubbler, through each jar to make sure any air bubbles are allowed to escape so it doesn't interfere with the canning process. A few of the jars need to be topped off to reach that 1/4 inch of headspace. Next, I use a damp paper towel to wipe down each rim. These preserves are sticky, so this was an important step to make sure none of those sticky preserves interfered with the seal. Finally, each jar got a lid. The lids have been soaking in some warm water just to help activate the seal. And then the last step before going into the canner was putting on those bands to fingertip tight. If you're newer to canning, fingertip tight means you go to the first bit of resistance and then just turn about 1/4 turn past that. My canner is at a full boil, so I'm going to lower these jams, these preserves in. I never seem to figure out the best way to do this without knocking things down. All right, I'm going to set a timer this time. Won't make the granola mistake again. Timing does have to be precise when canning, so 10 minutes. And while that boils, I'm going to get out ingredients for our last recipe, blueberry muffins. Over the last 2 recipes, I've been telling you how we've been gluten-free and sugar-free, and now I'm going to make something that completely contradicts that. It's been a year since we've changed our diets a bit, but we do give ourselves breaks, and I just can't have all these beautiful blueberries on hand without making some blueberry muffins. So let's make that final treat together. This recipe comes from Sally's Baking Addiction. I love her recipes for baking. She's always really precise. I like the results, and she often explains how ingredients function, why she created the recipe the way she did, which helps me become a better baker. Get this out of the way. Feels good to be away from that hot stove. All right, I'm going to start with mixing together the topping ingredients. I'm using pecans instead of walnuts because that's what I have. So for the topping, I'll put in 1/2 cup brown sugar, 1/2 cup pecans, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. That's my timer. So I'm going to set another timer for 5 minutes. Oh, first I'll turn off the burner. Now I'll set another timer for 5 minutes before I pull these out, just to allow them to gradually cool off, because we don't want to shock them. I'm going to take that lid off and start the cooling process. It's time to take them out. Hoping they all sealed. But if some didn't, we'll just enjoy some jelly today. Keep saying jelly. Preserves. Preserves are just chunkier jelly. They all sealed. That gave me 6 half-pint jars of blueberry maple preserves. So that'll give me some toppings for my morning yogurt. That'll see John through a couple sessions of peanut butter and jelly. I'm glad to add this to our little stash. My topping is mixed up. Now I'm going to mix together my dry ingredients. For the flour, I just find weighing flour annoying because it can vary so much depending on how tightly you pack it. So I like that Sally's Baking Addiction always includes flour weights. I'm just going to weigh it. Try to only weigh things when they're my first ingredient, because I often get too much. And you're kind of ruined if it's not your first ingredient. There we go, 219. All right, teaspoon baking soda. Teaspoon baking powder. I really like this Rumford baking powder because it doesn't have aluminum in it. The standard baking powder that you can get at the grocery store has some aluminum in it. I mention these things if it's helpful or interesting, but if you don't have the time and the energy right now to be worried about that, that's fine too. I have lived several seasons in that sense. There was a time of life when I couldn't care, and a time when I did. I'm going to whisk these together. And then the wet ingredients I'm going to combine with my mixer. I'm going to combine my butter and sugars in the mixer. The recipe calls for room temperature butter. I always forget to get out those ingredients ahead of time. Sally always calls for room temperature wet ingredients. Fortunately, we have a fresh stick of butter in the butter dish, so that will work. The butter, white sugar, and brown sugar get creamed together for about 2 minutes. At this point, the recipe calls for 2 room temperature eggs. I just can't seem to remember to get those kinds of ingredients out ahead of time. So my hack is to put eggs in a bowl of warm to hot water for a few minutes while I mix up the dry ingredients and they warm up. Half a cup sour cream. This is just going to be cold. That's all right. Adding in 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I'm just gradually adding in those dry ingredients as well. The last ingredient to be added is the milk. Last step, I'm adding in my frozen blueberries. I love that this recipe calls for fresh or frozen. I also love that blueberries are really easy to freeze. So if you buy in bulk and you're overwhelmed by them, or you grow them and you're not sure what to do, they can go into the freezer without any flash freezing. Because they're so small and they're not really juicy on the outside, I just threw these right into a bag and you can see they are not sticking together at all. So they're effortless to preserve that way if that's what you need to do. That's a cup. And a half. Uh-oh. Stem. These muffins also freeze really well, so this would be something that would be easy to double or triple. It's not much more effort to make a double batch, and that way you'll have more for your family in the freezer if that's helpful for you. I'm making a single batch because I know my kids won't eat these, even though they're delicious and they're basically cake. My kids are just not into chunks of fruit in their baked goods. So this is a treat for John and I. A dozen muffins works great for us. I also really love this crumbly topping that goes on the muffins. It makes them feel more like something I might have bought when I was out at a cafe, and it adds a nice little extra bit of texture on top too. These are going into the oven. While those are baking, let me show you the granola because it's all cooled off now and it's perfect. Because I pressed it down flat to cool, it's stuck together now and it's kind of got this crunchy, gooey chewiness to it. And it'll continue to dry. It's not completely done yet, but as it continues to dry, it'll have these crunchy clusters, which I love to have either over yogurt or sometimes I just eat it as a cereal with milk. Can't find a toothpick right now, so this will have to do. Oh, that came out clean. All right, let me set it with the lineup. That was a productive morning. Let me flip you around and show you the lineup. We made blueberry vanilla granola and 6 jars of blueberry maple preserves and a dozen blueberry muffins. Oof. Look at that, it's loaded. That's good. Thanks again for joining me for this morning of blueberry projects. I was nervous when I put that 10-pound box in the fridge that something might go to waste. So I'm glad that everything is preserved now. I still have some dried blueberries and some frozen blueberries, and then I've got all this good stuff we made this morning. You can find me on Instagram at locally.raised if you want to see what we're up to on a daily basis. There's always things happening in the garden and in the kitchen. I look forward to sharing more with you next week. Until then, bye.